Before we open this file, I need to explain what this channel is. This is the Corrupted Chronicle, and the basic idea is simple. The Highlander movies, the shows, the comics, the books, the weird contradictions, and the ugly timeline problems. The stuff that fans argue about at 2 o'clock in the morning because one database screen said something insane. I'm treating it all like a Watcher archive. Not perfect truth, not scripture, not ignore the problem because canon's messy. A record, and records can be wrong. That's the whole point, because inside Highlander, the Watchers are supposed to observe immortals, record their lives, and stay out of the game. And that sounds noble. It also sounds exactly like the kind of thing a secret organization would say 5 minutes before you found out that their files were full of errors, omissions, bad sourcing, institutional cowardice, and committee-approved nonsense with a date stamp. So on this channel, we're not just asking what happened, we're asking who recorded it, who benefits if the record stays clean. What did the Watchers know? What did they miss? What did they bury? And when the record contradicts itself, do we confirm it, amend it, mark it corrupted, or throw it into Apocrypha and let the council scream about it in the comments? That's the game here. Every episode is a case file. Every case file gets a ruling, and the council is you. You can confirm the Chronicle, you can amend the record, you can mark the file corrupted, or you can classify it as Apocrypha. And for the first case, we're starting with the worst possible place for the Watchers to have a bad file, the Kurgan. Not some background immortal, not some forgotten name buried in a corner of lore. The Kurgan, the monster who nearly killed Connor MacLeod in Scotland in 1536, the man who actually killed Ramírez, and the nightmare who came back in 1985 to claim the prize. If the Watchers can't keep his files clean, then the problem is not a typo. The problem is the archive. That's why I'm making this video, because Highlander's contradictions are not just mistakes to be waved away. They're evidence. They're cracks in the official record. And once you start treating the Watcher archive like an institution instead of a holy book, the whole franchise gets more interesting. So no, this is not me trying to ruin Highlander, because I love Highlander. It's the greatest show in all of history, as far as I'm concerned. But that's why the bad records bother me. That's why the contradictions matter, and that's why the council is now in session. Did the Watchers lie about the Kurgan? Let's open the file. Council members, there are mistakes, and there are failures so large they stop being mistakes and start looking like evidence of collapse. The Kurgan file is one of them. This is not a clerical smudge in the margin of an unimportant record. This is not a misspelled village name buried in a dead archive. This is the file of the Kurgan, one of the most feared immortals ever recorded, a creature old enough to become legend, violent enough to shape the lives of other immortals, and memorable enough that history itself should have had difficulty forgetting him. And yet, according to the Watcher's own database, the Kurgan did not become immortal until 1453. That's not a date, that's a confession, because the accepted chronicles tell us something very different. Ramírez did not speak of the Kurgan as a recent inconvenience. He speaks of him as an ancient danger, a known predator, a thing with a history long before Connor MacLeod understood the rules of the world he had entered. So when the Watchers placed the Kurgans beginning in the 15th century, they're not just getting a number wrong, they're cutting centuries out of the record, millennia even. They're amputating history and filling the stump. And somehow, this was allowed to sit in the archive. No warning, no dispute marker or visible sources, no trembling note from a responsible Watcher saying, this can't be possible. Just a clean field on a clean screen, radiating the smug confidence of an institution that has confused formatting with truth. That's how empires of nonsense are built, not by shouting lies from the rooftops, by typing them neatly into boxes. The file is dangerous because it's not entirely false. Connor did meet the Kurgan in Scotland. Sunda Cassier did die in 1985, and Connor did kill the Kurgan the same year. Those facts are not the problem. They're the cover. A completely false record announces itself. This one hides behind accurate entries and waits for the reader to stop checking. So we begin in 1453. Maybe it means first verified sighting. Maybe it means surviving report. Maybe it means some exhausted clerk copied the right number into the wrong field and wandered off before damaging another century. Fine, then say it. But the archive doesn't say that. It gives no source, no caution, and no context. It simply presents the number as though the matter has been settled. Once that number enters the system, the damage spreads. Early sightings become suspect. Old aliases become harder to connect. Reports that should matter are dismissed because the database has already decided when the Kurgan's life begins. At that point, the archive is no longer preserving history, it's enforcing a mistake. Then Ramírez enters the file, and the situation declines from embarrassing to catastrophic. The record appears to place the Kurgan's encounter with Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramírez decades too late. There's one problem. Ramírez was already dead. Connor's first death happened in Scotland in 1536. Ramírez finds him afterwards, he trains him, he warns him, and then the Kurgan kills Ramírez while Connor and Heather are still living in the Highlands. That's not decorative lore. That's the basis of Connor MacLeod's existence as an immortal. Move Ramírez's death too far forward and you're not adjusting a date. You're reaching into the foundation of the Chronicle with a crowbar. Apparently, the Watchers found a way to lose track of the man after he'd already been beheaded. That's an achievement usually reserved for religion and bad sequels. Maybe the date refers to a report. Maybe it refers to a recovered document, and maybe the original entry was damaged. Again, fine. But once again, the archive gives us certainty where it owes us explanation. And certainty without evidence is not authority. It is costume jewelry for incompetence. And then the Watchers lose the Kurgan for more than 2 centuries. Unknown. That word should have set off every alarm in the archive. This is not some quiet immortal hiding in the back of a shop repairing clocks, drinking tea and hoping history left him alone. This was the Kurgan. History should not have misplaced him, and the Watchers certainly should not have. But they did. Or maybe they didn't, because other Watcher material places James Horton in observation of the Kurgan before Connor killed him. So now the Council faces a magnificent institutional absurdity. So the Watchers either lost the Kurgan or they had him under observation. It can't be both ways. And the archive can't tell us which failure occurred. This is not a loose end. This is a record eating itself. A wrong date is a problem. A wrong death chronology is a scandal. A missing subject is failure. But an archive that can't tell us whether its own surveillance happened was crossed into something worse. It's lost the right to be believed without inspection. And then there's Horton. Horton did not need to create the corruption. Horton weaponized it. He understood what the Watchers had built before they did. They thought they were preserving history. He saw a weapons locker. Names, locations, habits, relationships, and weaknesses are all gathered in secret, all protected from outside challenge, and all entrusted to people who apparently couldn't keep the Kurgan centuries straight. The Watchers believed secrecy protected the archive. In practice, secrecy protected whoever abused it. That's why the file matters, not because it proves every theory, and it doesn't prove Horton wrote every false entry. It doesn't prove that the Council ordered a cover-up, but with record keeping this sloppy, the Council's nearly forced into absurd questions. Did Connor MacLeod even kill the Kurgan in 1985? The Chronicle says yes, the file says yes, but the same file misplaces centuries, damages Ramírez's chronology, and can't decide whether its own Watchers were watching. So congratulations to the archive. It's managed to make even a confirmed beheading feel like it needs a receipt. And that's not even the worst part of it, because, I mean, come on. It says that Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramírez was killed by Kurgan? No, it was Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramírez. I don't know if it was a last name, if it was a title that was given to him, if it was the region that he was living in. Ultimately, they messed that up too, and that's irritating. This doesn't prove the Kurgan survived Connor's blade in 1985, whatever resurrection rumors his little cult circulated afterwards. It proves something more embarrassing. The Watchers built a system where even the truth becomes suspicious by association. And then they expected the rest of us to bow before the screen? No. The Council should reject that demand. The Kurgan file is not reliable enough to govern the Chronicle. Mark it corrupted, open the wider audit, dates need sources, uncertainty needs labels, alterations need a trial, and any Watcher who considers that excessive should be kept far away from the archive until they understand the difference between history and paperwork. This file entered the Chronicle on September 27, 1993. More than 3 decades later, it remains exactly what it was then, wrong, and far too confident for something this broken. Decades have passed, technology has changed. Entire archives have been digitized, revised, migrated, backed up, and corrected. The Watchers have had more than enough time to find the file, read the file, question the file, and fix the file. And yet here we are, forced to convene a council vote because apparently even obvious reality must wait its turn behind archive procedure. And of course, because this is the Watcher system, even obvious corrections have to be dragged through procedure. A file can contradict the Chronicle, misplace centuries, confuse the dead with the living, and still somewhere in the archive, there's probably a form waiting for 3 signatures and a committee stamp. That may be the most Watcher thing about this entire case. The record is broken, but the institution must now decide whether it's allowed to notice. Fine, let's honor the machinery. Council members, enter your ruling below. Confirm the Chronicle, amend the record, mark the file corrupted, or classify it as apocrypha. I recommend corruption, not because the file contains no truth, because it contains truth, error, and unsupported certainty in the same official voice. And that's how bad records survive bureaucracies built to protect themselves. The council will enter its ruling into the Chronicle, assuming, of course, that someone files it correctly. And remember, the record was never neutral.